Today we're talking about veterans benefits. And if you're like me and like a lot of people, you know that benefits are available, but you might not be fully aware of all the things that can be done for your veteran once they pass away. It's really important to know this. You know, in America, every day should be Veterans Day. So if you want to know more about this, please just stay tuned. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Scan FYI. My guest today is Michael Grandi. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
So Mike is from Jersey Memorial Group. And Mike, why don't you just take a moment, please, introduce yourself and explain a little bit about Jersey Memorial Group, and then we'll get into our conversation.
Sure. My name is Michael Grandi. By trade, I'm a funeral director. I've been a funeral director for 26 years. I'm currently employed, like you said, with Jersey Memorial Group, which we are a family-owned network of funeral homes across New Jersey and Pennsylvania. We operate 15 locations in total, 13 in New Jersey, 2 in Pennsylvania. So we've been around a long time and, really proud of being one of the largest family-owned funeral home organizations in New Jersey, providing service across the state.
Well, in addition to all of that, Mike, we want to say thank you because you are a wonderful supporter of SCAN, and for that we are appreciative. So thank you.
Absolutely, I'm glad to be an active part of it.
But now we do believe that in America, every day is Veterans Day. And so I think that there's a lot of people like me who really don't know all the benefits that are available. In life, we know there are many benefits, but it turns out there are many benefits to take advantage of once someone passes away. And that's what we want to talk about today. So I'm not even sure what's the best place to get started. Someone passes away, and I had asked you this before, how will someone, if the family doesn't say my loved one was a benefit, how will anyone know?
So, the way a funeral director is or it's made known to a funeral director that they are a veteran comes by default. Simply because on a New Jersey death certificate, it specifically asks if the decedent was a veteran, and if so, it asks their active duty or war dates, or if they served in a war. So typically at the time of the arrangement conference, when a funeral director is collecting that vital statistic information, when they get to that point, that's where that topic would come up, whether they were a veteran, yes or no. Our organization is a little bit different, because we typically ask at the time of the initial phone call when we're collecting information on the death, name of the deceased, next of kin, the location of the deceased, so that we could bring them into our care. At that time, we ask if they're a veteran, because our vehicles, we typically carry American flags, and if they are a veteran, they are taken from their place of passing, and they are flag draped when they're brought into our care. So we know ahead of time, if they're a veteran. The other reason why we like to ask that ahead of time is a lot of time, depending, and we'll get into it later, on what benefits a family is seeking, they have to prove the discharge of the veteran or show proof that they're a veteran.
All right, well, that makes sense, yeah.
And, if we have that conversation in the initial phone call, now it gives the family an opportunity or time to search for those documents, be better prepared when they come in for the arrangement conference with the funeral director, to have that information ahead of time for us. Rather than the first time I sit down with the family, this topic comes up, we're actively engaged, we're discussing all these different options with their services, cemetery, and now it's, well, you're going to have to go home and find these documents in order for us to proceed. So that's why it's important for us to, do that in the initial phone call rather than at the arrangement conference.
And that makes perfect sense. So once it's been established that someone is a veteran, What are some of the kinds of things that, as a veteran, you're entitled to? And I definitely want to hear about being buried in, like, who gets to be buried in a veteran cemetery? How does that come to be?
Sure. It's not a direct or easy question, but I'll give you the complete answer. So any active duty, retired, or honorably discharged veteran from
Okay.
any of the branches of the service are entitled to burial in a national or state cemetery. Some of the cemeteries, one being Arlington National, is restrictive. You have to have certain rank, or if you were killed in action, you're entitled to burial there.
Okay.
Most of the cemeteries, national or state, and when I say national or state, national cemeteries are funded entirely by the federal government, and that's how they're operated. So, for instance, Long Island National Cemetery, Washington Crossing National Cemetery here in Pennsylvania, in Newtown,
Yeah.
Arlington National Cemetery, those are run by the government. In New Jersey, we have the Brigadier General William C. Doyle Veteran Cemetery, which is located in Wrightstown, and that is a state-run cemetery. What that means is the employees are employees of the state of New Jersey. It's ran by the state, it's funded by the state, but it's supplemented with federal money. And it still follows the same guidelines. Most cemeteries require the decedent to live within 75 miles of the cemetery to be buried in that particular cemetery. New Jersey recently had a major change because the veteran cemetery that I mentioned, Brigadier General William C. Doyle, being that it was a state cemetery, it was only eligible for New Jersey residents, and you had to show proof of residency. And they recently changed that, and they're opening that up now. I'm not sure if it's because the overabundance of space and the timeline for burial, or they were a little
Right.
restrictive because they were worried about space. But they're becoming a little bit more, conservative with some of their, restrictions that they had in place.
All right. Well, thanks for that. So that's good. That's good to know. But now let's talk about the more fundamental benefits that are available to all veterans. So, because is there funding towards your burial, towards your funeral?
So I'll yes and no. I'll go back to the veteran cemetery. So when you are eligible for burial in a veteran cemetery, that burial is at no cost to the family, zero. So you're entitled, the decedent or the veteran is entitled to a grave.
Mm-hmm.
Their wife is entitled to a grave,
Oh,
and any dependent children are entitled to a grave.
okay.
They get the grave, they get the opening closing of the grave, they get burial vaults, and they get cemetery markers on all their graves. So to give you a monetary value, if two people are buried, a husband and wife, in a veteran cemetery, as opposed to going in a private cemetery, it could be as much as a $13,000 benefit or savings as opposed to going in a private cemetery.
All right. Well, that's
It's
a big
pretty,
chunk of money for most people. Yeah.
absolutely, it's pretty significant. So if you decide that you want to get buried in a private cemetery, obviously at a private cemetery, it's all the expenses related to everything are on you,
Right.
except the cemetery marker, because the veteran marker that the VA provides to mark a grave is still provided even if you're buried in a private cemetery. So that could be a 24 by 12-inch bronze marker. It could be a granite, marker that goes on the grave to identify that there's a veteran buried there. that is still provided in a private cemetery. Some of our private cemeteries have even taken it a step further, and within those private cemeteries, they designated a veteran section where veterans are buried and they offer it at a discounted rate to the consumer. Or they'll give one free grave for the veteran, you pay full price for the spouse, that type of thing. So there are private cemeteries out there that still do cater to our veterans.
Oh, all right. There's a lot of things available, and during a time when you're preparing for a funeral, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of emotion. We might not remember all of this. So is it up to the? I don't know if I want to say is it up to, but the funeral director will sort of assist the family to make this happen and let you know what is available to you. In case I don't know, it's
Correct. So when we sit down with the family and I know that they're a veteran, the first thing we're going to find out naturally is what type of services they're seeking, whether it's burial or cremation, whether they're going to do some kind of ceremonial service or not, so that we then know what types of things I'm going to present to them. Now, if the family says, it's going to be burial, I'm going to ask them if they already own space. Yes or no.
oh yeah, that's true.
If they don't own space, then I could make them aware that they're eligible for burial at no cost in the veteran cemetery. If they already own space or the spouse is already buried in a private cemetery, we're not going to have that conversation, but we will have a conversation about the cemetery marker if they still want to take advantage, of that. The other one we didn't talk about, which kind of leads me to that, is the next question. If they were having a service or some kind of ceremony, whether in the funeral home, at a church, or at graveside, and irrespective if they're going to do burial or cremation, is an honor guard. Because they're entitled to an honor guard, which consists of, active duty military that come out. They will bring a bugler and a flag folding detail. They will play taps. They will fold the flag. They will present to the next of kin. And that's eligible wherever they want those services. Now, if it's going to be a service at the funeral home and a cremation, we can have the military come right to the funeral home to do that. If it's going to be at a grave, they'll go to a private cemetery or they'll go to a veteran cemetery. If we're going to have a mass at a church or just a service in a church and there's not going to be a burial, they'll come right to the church and they'll render those honors at the church. Those are all things that the funeral director will arrange on behalf of the family with applications. And then, of course, when the family provides us the proof, which the major document that all families of veterans should keep handy
Right.
is what's called a DD-214 or DD-214. That's their honorable discharge papers that every veteran gets at the point of their discharge, which basically shows their date of entry, place of entry, date of discharge, place of discharge, actual active duty dates, their rank, any medals that were awarded or commendations that they received, all appears on that document.
It sounds like if you're married to a veteran and they pass away, and of course you the surviving spouse really doesn't have a clue beyond, oh, my spouse was a veteran. It sounds. I mean, the good news of this is it sounds like at the funeral parlor, the director will know all of this and walk you through it and make it happen, which I think is a huge relief for anyone who is unaware of what's available to them. So that's the good thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it's our job. People think funeral directors are just doing the directing and facilitating of services, but a lot of what we do is educating that family or that consumer on what's available, and then after getting their feedback, helping to carry that out. So there's a lot of which people don't realize, a lot of behind the scenes paperwork that we
Right.
do to make this happen. If they are going to go in a national or state cemetery, we're the ones making that phone call. We're the ones finding out their eligibility. We're the ones filling out the application and submitting it via fax or email, waiting for that return phone call from the cemetery to let us know that they are indeed eligible and they're going to schedule our burial, and then, conveying that information back to the family. When it comes to the flag, there's a 5 foot by 9 foot flag that you see that drapes the casket of veterans. We get that flag. We do a flag application, and believe it or not, the local post office is the one that issues all the flags for our deceased veterans. So certain post
Did not know
offices
that.
certain post offices will supply them. We go with that application filled out. We give it to the post, whoever's working behind the desk, and they in turn give us that American flag, which is brought back to the funeral home. So that's where we get those flags from.
I always say this. One of the reasons I love Scan FYI is that there are so many people out there like me who, you might know a smidge of info, but there's so much more. And I just think it's great that you're sharing all of this, because I suspect many people like me really did not have a clue how you would make all of this happen.
Mm-hmm.
But now I do have an interesting question just as I'm listening to you. All right, so my spouse passes, or maybe they haven't passed away yet, but they are very ill and it might be imminent or it might be weeks away. But I know that I would like my spouse to be buried in a military cemetery. So I'm sure that doesn't happen in, a 24-hour window. I tell you this and you make it happen. So is it ever that people would share this with you well in advance so that it does happen seamlessly? Because if someone passes away on Monday, by Wednesday, I'm thinking this has not all been arranged. So I guess the question is, how long does this all take in real time to make this happen?
Great question.
I got to throw in a good one every now and then, Mike.
It's a multi-part answer. So if the veteran is still living, we're going to encourage the family to pre-register with the cemetery. Now that's if it's our Brigadier General William C. Doyle, because you can pre-register for burial. National cemeteries, you can't pre-register.
Okay.
But in New Jersey, you can. It's a downloadable form that gets filled out. It gets sent to the cemetery with the DD-214. They keep it on file, and you're obviously guaranteed a spot there. At the time of death, what that's going to do is it's going to speed up the process for us to get a date of burial. Now, because the cemetery can only do X amount of burials a day, and you know how many veterans there are, sometimes there's a 5-day wait. Sometimes it could be 7 to 10-day wait, depending on the schedule.
Wow. Yeah.
So if you're pre-registered, basically you go to the front of the line. When we reach out to the cemetery and let them know you're pre-registered, everything is already in the computer. They just look you up. They have your information there, your proof of residency, your DD-214. They're easily able to get us in, not the next day, sometimes not even within 48 hours, but maybe 3 to 4 days we could get that burial, which is a respectable time frame, as opposed to waiting a week. The other thing you have to remember is these cemeteries, both state and national cemeteries, are only Monday to Friday. They're government and state employees. They don't work the weekends. So when you think about losing a Saturday and or a Sunday, now you're talking about Monday to Friday. It makes the demand, that much more. That's why sometimes there is a longer wait than other times. But those are the phone calls we make. The first phone calls we make before we tell a family to schedule church or viewing or any types of other services is wait for us to get a hold of the cemetery, and wait for us to secure a date, and then we can back everything up from there to make sure that we're secure. Now, I do get families that say, well, Mike, I have family in town. We want to get things over with. Let's do things 2 days from now, and I'll do the burial privately a week from now, and I don't need everybody to be there. But I'm not
Oh,
going to hold things up for a week. And
okay.
sometimes families will opt to do that as well. And, they have that option.
So you mean having the service right away, but then the burial is, okay, because
Another
that could
time.
even be a week
Yeah.
later.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
I mean, that happens by default in Arlington because Arlington National Cemetery is about an 8 week, wait on average. I've even gone longer, 3 to 4 months. We've
okay.
held decedents because if somebody wants them buried in that historic cemetery, they will certainly, wait. So nobody's going to wait 4 months to do a funeral ceremony. They're going to do it
Right.
now, and then we're going to do the burial privately, especially it's out of state. People want to get hotels and travel, that kind of thing. So,
So I never would have thought of that until we're having this conversation. And again, I'm guessing lots of people out there might have had the same question now that and it all makes sense, because it can't happen in a 24-hour period. That would just not seem logical. So I guess my point here, or we're making the point that if you know in advance that somebody wants to be buried in a military cemetery, then it's not a bad idea to register, especially in New Jersey. Very good.
absolutely, it's encouraged to register.
Yeah, would have never
It's
known that.
also encouraged to have that DD 214 handy, so that it could be produced when it needs to be, both beforehand or at a time of the passing. And then one last thing we didn't discuss, and it went with monetary, is if they are buried privately, there is an allowance, monetary allowance for burial benefits that a funeral home should also do the application for. It's called an application of burial benefits. And after October 1 of 2024, they raised, that amount, and it was $978 towards a plot, allowance and burial is what they, will allow. If you
Okay.
pass away in a VA hospital, there's also an additional allowance for transportation costs to get the decedent from the VA hospital to the funeral home as well. And that's separate from, everything else. That's an application that's made, to the VA, and then the family is notified whether they're eligible for that reimbursement or not, or what that determination is going to be.
One of the things I'm learning from this conversation, like so many conversations we've had before, is preparation is key, and having your forms and your paperwork in a place where they're easily accessible, where your family knows where they are, is certainly going to save a lot of time and aggravation when something does happen, right? So that's
Absolutely.
yeah,
It's added stress. I mean, now you have somebody
yeah,
that just lost somebody they love. They have a funeral director and the business end of getting things taken care of. Maybe they're even thinking about the will, and they have to settle affairs after the funeral's even done. They have all
right.
this weighing on them. And now it's, oh my God, I'd love to have the military there to fold the flag and present the flag and honor my loved one in this way. And now I don't know if I'm going to have the means to do that because I have to scramble through paperwork or in an office, or where did they keep these documents if they even have it, and now
Yeah.
there's this
Yep.
added stress that a family doesn't need. And we've seen situations where unfortunately the family couldn't find it, and it's I can only do so much, without having the documents that they
Right.
require. And, I never want to see a family have to go through that where there's something that they wanted and they just can't, have that service provided because they couldn't locate a document.
So one more document that everyone needs to know to keep track of. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
of course, all of Michael's info from Jersey Memorial Group will be in the show notes if you want to reach out to him. As you can see, he's an extremely valuable resource, and I know he would not mind helping anyone with their questions. So, Mike, thank you so much for being my guest today.
You're very welcome. It was great to be here and look forward to the next one.
Yes, yes, always great information. Remember out there, if it's important to you, it's important to us. I'm Andrea Tarr. We'll see you next time on Scan FYI. Bye, everyone, and bye, Mike.
Bye.